Hey guys, it's Mad Friday and welcome back. Right, someone's asked me to do a video on ammunition choices. But to do a video on ammunition choices, you first need to talk about penetration mechanics and fully understand that before you can talk about the different ammunition types. So that's what I'm going to do. First, going to go through penetration mechanics and then talk about different ammunition choices. Right, so where do we start? Well, I'm going to start with this picture first. This is one of the in-game pictures. From this picture, Wargaming are trying to tell you that if you angle your armour, you're going to be better off and have more chance of bouncing a shot than if you don't angle your armour. So why is this? Right, this is to do with effective armour thickness. Effective armour thickness basically means the thickness of your armour combined with the angling, and it increases the armour thickness and becomes effective armour thickness. And to show you this a little bit more in detail, I'm going to go to another couple of different slides which try and do the maths of it and try and make it a bit more simple, if you know what I mean. Right, so I'll put that one up right now. Right, so let's talk about the bottom part of this picture first. As you can see, you have a nice big thick piece of armour and an AP round about to hit it. That AP round is about to hit it at the perfect angle, the zero angle or the normal, 90 degrees or perpendicular from the piece of armour. That is the ideal angle to hit with any round pretty much. But there's two parts of this picture. As you can see up the top, there's another piece of armour being aimed at by the same AP round, but this smaller piece of armour is angled. And as you can see, the lines that are going up from the thick piece of armour are exactly the same width of the angled piece of armour, the sort of path that round would have to travel through the thinner piece of armour when it's angled. So what this picture is trying to show you in layman's terms, that a smaller thickness armour, angled, has the same effective thickness as a thicker piece of armour that isn't angled. And once you can get that through your head, then you can start seeing the basics of effective armour thickness. There's no numbers on this slide, but say the bottom piece of armour was 100mm, the top one would probably have to be 50, 60mm thick to have the same effective armour thickness. So this is just exactly the same thing, but just expressed in a different way. The red line that is square with the piece of metal at the 0 degree angle, that piece of metal would be 100mm thick. The same round, but fired at 60 degrees through the piece of metal, would have to pass through 200mm of armour, so the effective armour thickness at 60 degrees is 200mm. That is why if you're firing, say at the front of a Tiger like in that first slide, if you're firing dead on, you may be able to penetrate with the standard round of that you're firing, but if he's nicely angled all of the way round, say you've got, what was Tiger got, 100mm front, maybe, like this. If you're firing at 60 degrees and you're in another tier 7, say an IS with 170 odd mil of pen, if you hit his front plate at 60 degrees, it's going to bounce. There we go. I hope from these two slides I've got the basics through of effective armour thickness. And now we can move on to a few more points that, well not points, a few more game mechanics that Wargaming put in just to make the game a little bit more spicy. Right, next slide we're going to talk about another one of the penetration mechanics. We're going to talk about round normalization. Round normalization is basically, it's very hard to explain. I'll talk about the picture and hopefully I'll be able to explain to you now. That is a HESH round hitting a piece of metal. HESH rounds are designed to increase normalization, so it's a good slide to show you what normalization is. Say that HESH round is hitting that piece of metal of 60 degrees from the normal angle. I don't know the exact figure for it. I can't find the exact figure for HESH round normalization, but imagine that's an AP round. AP round to get 5 degrees of normalization. So if that AP round is hitting that piece of metal at 60 degrees, with the 5 degrees of normalization, you can see the red highlighted round in the background. That is the normalization. Basically, it cants the round towards the normal and makes the penetration better. So say it's hitting at 60 degrees, 5 degrees of normalization, the AP round penetration calculation would be calculated for 55 degrees and not 60. So there'd be less effective armour thickness to go through and a greater chance of penetrating. And that is basically what normalization is. I hope I've explained it well enough there. Different rounds get different normalization. AP rounds, as I said, 5 degrees. APCR is only 2 degrees. Heat and HE is 0. And HESH I can't find out, but I'm sure it's more than AP because that's what they're designed to do. So it's a minimum of 5 degrees with a HESH round. Right, so that's normalization spoken about. Right, so let's just take an example. We use this picture again. Say you fired an AP round at this piece of metal at 50 degrees, 5 degrees of normalization. The calculation would be carried out for 45 degrees. Say you fired an APCR round at 50 degrees, you get 2 degrees normalization. So the calculation would be carried out at 48 degrees. Heat and HE are 0, so if you hit it at 50, calculation is carried out for 50. And HESH, I will try and find out, but I don't know off the top of my head, and I can't find out in any literature or wikis or anything. But HESH is more than AP, so that's what one of the plus points about a HESH round is. So we've done the basics of the penetration mechanics. Now let's talk about a couple of more abbreviations that need to be cleared up so there's no confusion later on. So now we're going to talk about the difference between a bounce and a ricochet. A bounce is when the effective armour thickness is greater than the penetration ability of the round. So say you've got 190mm of pen and the armour is 200mm effective thickness, that is a bounce. A ricochet is something completely different. And it's different for different rounds again. A ricochet with AP, APCR, HE and HESH, since I've just found out, occurs when the impact angle is greater than 70 degrees. So that is for those four. Heat is slightly different and has been changed recently. Heat now is a ricochet at over 85 degrees. So there is one plus point for using a heat round. Although the in-game text things tell you to use heat against flat armour and it's not good against angled armour, that is a bit of a lie because you actually get more of an impact angle before a heat round will ricochet. The only difference there though is with the HE and HESH rounds. Obviously because HESH, I've just found out, are modelled in the exact same way as HER in World of Tanks, although that's not realistic to real life. HE rounds, they will ricochet, but as long as the armour thickness is not too great, you will do splash damage, because HE shells have a splash radius. So if a HE or a HESH shell ricochets, you may still get some splash damage out of that shot. So that's the only difference from the other ones right there. Last thing I need to talk about before we completely move away from this subject is overmatching. There are two types of overmatching, partial and total. Partial overmatching occurs when the caliber of the gun the round is fired from is 2 times the thickness of the armour the round is hitting, or more. So if I can explain that a bit more, say you've got a 100mm gun and you fire a round at 40mm of armour. 100mm is more than double the thickness of the armour you're firing at, so you will partially overmatch that armour. Total overmatching occurs when the caliber of the gun the round is fired from is 3 times the thickness of the armour you're hitting. So what happens then? Right, so partial overmatching. Like I said, 100mm cannon hitting 40mm of armour. That is more than twice the thickness. So the extra penetration is used in a calculation. I'll put it up on screen now, it's quite hard to explain. Basically, if your caliber of your gun is more than twice the thickness of the armour you're hitting, you will get some extra normalization, which means when the penetration calculation is carried out, there will be more chance of penetrating the armour. Right, so that's quite easy, that one. Total overmatching occurs when the calibre of your gun is 3 times the armour thickness. In this case, no ricochet will occur. If you've got, say, a 155mm cannon and you're shooting at a light tank, there should be no bounces, no ricochets at all, ever, and you should penetrate every time, including HE shells, which is why big calibre guns can be so dangerous. But, as we all know, I've seen it not happen. So whether this actually works correct in World of Tanks, Xbox 360 and One, I really don't know. Next thing we're going to talk about is heat rounds. Heat rounds are not very good against spaced armour. So why is that? Well, the heat round itself, it gets its penetration ability from the explosive within the shell container. When a heat round hits a piece of armour, it explodes, and the energy created in that explosion punches the round through the armour. So you can see a piece of spaced armour in this diagram. When a heat round hits the first piece of armour, the spaced armour, the round explodes and it punches the round through that piece of armour. There is then another piece of armour behind. Because there is no explosive power left, all that is left is the kinetic energy within that round to try and punch through the next piece of armour. That means in World of Tanks, the penetration ability of the round is carried out, the calculation is carried out twice. Once for the first piece of spaced armour, and then second for the armour behind. Heat rounds lose most of their kinetic energy punching through the first piece of armour, the spaced armour, and there's hardly any penetration ability left to get through the armour behind, and that is why heat rounds are not very good against spaced armour. And I hope I've explained that okay. If not, just put a question in the comments down below. Next thing we're going to talk about is penetration loss over distance. Different round types act differently at different distances. I'm going to start with AP. AP loses very little penetration over distance. APCR loses a lot of penetration over distance, but there is one caveat to that, and that is tanks that use APCR as their standard ammunition, tier 10 mediums and some tier 9s. Their APCR, the standard APCR, acts in the same way as AP. Heat, HE and HESH lose no penetration over distance. So if you are firing at a target a long way away, this is all stuff you need to be running through your head. Do I need a premium round? Is this mouse at 600 meters? By the time my APCR round gets there, is it going to have lost all its penetration? Should I be using an AP round? Stuff like this, there is so much to talk about and take in, but on the battlefield, but when you're in a fight, some of this is just going to go completely out of your head. I know all this stuff off by heart, but I never do most of it. It's all well and good talking about it in theory, but actually doing it in practice, it takes a lot of concentration and forethought. So the last thing we're going to talk about is muzzle velocity. Muzzle velocity is the speed of the round when it exits the gun barrel. It's quite simple. Different tanks will have different muzzle velocities, and the same tank firing different ammunition will have different muzzle velocities. So what effect does that have on you? Well, say you fire one shot at a speeding target with an AP round, you will have to lead the target quite a lot, because they are fast firing but not horrendously fast. If you that shot bounce and you change to an APCR round, the target's doing the same speed, you'll have to lead the target less because the muzzle velocity is higher. Basically, if you've done maths at school and you know about vectors, it's basically how helicopters fly and use maps and stuff like that. It's all geeky science. But at the end of the day, all this information is available, the different muzzle velocities, but the figures are meaningless really. All of the things we've talked about so far, the whole video, most of it comes down to experience. Say you're in a tier 8 medium and a tier 10 heavy comes towards you. One match, it may go completely wrong. You might use the wrong ammunition, fire in the wrong places, at the wrong times. You will learn from that. The next match, you may switch to premium earlier. You may choose a different spot to shoot at on his tank. You may know it might not work completely at all and choose to try and outflank him and outmaneuver him. Everything, like I said, everything we've spoken about is all down to experience. Nobody can be expected to remember all of this stuff in their heads. So just keep playing, keep practicing, and it all comes down to experience at the end of the day. Right, I hope the sort of technical stuff hasn't bored you too much and you might have actually learned something from it. And there we go. Right, I hope this video helps. Please give it a like if you did like it. Please sub if you're not. And one point I've taken from this for future videos that I do, if I'm doing a replay of a game, I will spend more time trying to highlight why I've chosen an ammo choice at the time. And there we go. Cheers guys, I'll catch you on the next one. See you later.